just the fact that I could train jiu-jitsu and I could be something and it was happening was monumental. Not that I won XYZ, not that I did XYZ, but the fact that I had an opportunity to use it to be something more and that I could do it, like I did it. That just showed me the ability each person has to create something of their life and create what they want of their life.
Hello, friends. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Mayn Idea Podcast, where today I get to sit down with Amy Campo. A quick reminder for those that enjoy this podcast, please take 30 seconds and leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify and subscribe to the YouTube channel. This helps the show get discovered organically and helps me continually bring on amazing guests. Also, there are now timestamps in the show notes, so feel free to jump around to the part that interests you most, although I recommend listening to the episode in its entirety. Amy Campo is an American submission grappler and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, multiple-time IBJJF World, Pan, and American National Jiu-Jitsu champion, and in 2022, she exploded into the spotlight by beating Gabi Garcia to become the ADCC Submission Fighting World champion. There are so many things I want to say about how much I love this episode, but I'm just going to let you listen to it. I hope that you enjoy it as much as I did. Without further ado, Amy Campo. Well, Amy, it is truly an honor to have you on the show. I was so inspired by your performance at ADCC. It was such a cool thing to watch live, and to have you here, it honestly means a lot. So thank you for taking the time to do this.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah,
so arm drag of the century. I mean, it was such a beautiful execution of such a classically drilled movement. What did it feel like to finish that match in that fashion?
I think I was glad. I think I was really patient. And I think patience pays off. I just hit the right move with the right time, and then was just like, keep going. Yeah. It's not over. Keep going. And then it was done. It was cool.
Is that like type of, I would call that like tenacity. I mean, you go out of bounds. You'd never for 1 second, it looked like from a bystander's view, even thought about stopping or doing any kind of letting up, and just kept driving and driving and driving. When you're training at Zenith, what are some of the principles you think that lend themselves to that type of effort?
I think we do, like the way we train, there's just always a lot of pressure. So not training is not an option. Like not training hard is not an option. If you don't train hard, it's like, what are you doing here? Go. So I think my teammates are always putting pressure on me because my teammates are also hungry, and we all know that we are training to be competitors. We all know that we're hunting, so there's just not training with pressure is just not an option.
I guess there's some, I can speak to this a lot more from like the physical training side, that's my career, but there's this argument for varied intensity, right? That in, let's say a strength training program, you're going to want to have some undulation of intensity to allow your body to build strength over time, let's say. Obviously, that's not a dynamic setting, so it's very different when you're on the mats and you're in the academy, but some people would argue that training hard all the time, or in martial arts, hard sparring all the time, is disadvantageous because of the exertion level for your body. So when you're talking about that output, right, like, because I would agree with you 100%. If you're not you're going to fight how you train in anything. You're going to perform how you train. And so if you don't have that level of intensity in the training hall, you can't really call on it in the most athletic expression of what you're doing. So there needs to be some degree of that happening on a daily basis. But when you're talking about that hard training, what does that look like in a given week or a month when ADCC isn't on the docket?
Okay. I think let's talk about mindset first.
Please, yes.
I think, and this is just a little titch on mindset. One, you don't come to training and not expect to not go hard. Did I say that right? You come to training, you expect to go hard.
Yes.
Okay? And that doesn't mean every training is going to be super crazy. There's a lot where it's like you're learning how to adapt under pressure. You're learning how to use different tools under pressure, because you're right. To go 100% in one aspect, in like explosiveness and speed, to go 100% every day is not realistic.
Right.
There are different things you can go 100% in every day. Like some days maybe you're more technically sharp. Some days maybe you're more explosive. Some days you really have good speed and agility. And you can balance your 100% in that way. I think, training 100% is not super realistic. And you're just going to have bad days. And that's part of it. And you can't have the expectation that you're just never not, unless you're just not going to come and train on those days. But I don't.
Yeah, I mean, the mindset of an athlete is it's a wild thing, because you have to stay sharp mentally and physically, and I think sometimes when you're feeling the physical, when the physicality starts to bang you up, and it can affect that mentality or how you see training. But when you're in there, you are a dominant force, right? In terms of your ability, the weight class that you're in, right? How do you find effectiveness with your training partners within the gym? Because you said something, I heard in an interview that I thought was really cool, talking about basically in essence of not leaving, the temptation for high-skilled athletes to leave their training facility and go elsewhere. And you're saying that it's better to stay in the academy and teach your training partners how to beat you, so that you're forced to become better. So how do you instill those values while regulating this variance in intensity?
Yeah, it's definitely a balance for sure, and I think I would accredit a lot of it to my coach. My coach is very good at recognizing what skills and what potential each student has and bringing those out. So I may not have like two other people who are like, my size, my age, my weight, high level, but I do have a mix of teammates who each have one or two things that they specialize in, that they're very good in. And I can bounce around between working with this guy with what he's really good at, and then I can help him on his weaknesses, and then this guy and work with him on his weaknesses, and I can get a balance between all my training partners. My coach is really good at noticing like who's got really good skills, and he's not afraid to grab somebody who's not a competitor and be like, hey, come over here, you want to train? And they're usually like, yeah, sure. And they jump in. Like, there's several guys who are not competitors that I get to train with who also help push the pace, and they get to take breaks as their body needs. So I think I'd credit a lot of this to my coach, but I think you can recognize and develop really good traits in each of your teammates, and why wouldn't you want to?
Well, to have a coach with that kind of foresight, to be able to find a way to draw that out of an athlete without, like you said, if there's someone who's not a competitor, you don't want to stifle their abilities by boxing them into that area. Whereas instead you can all utilize each other. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about martial arts is when you're at training, and especially I can only speak to from doing it for a while, you get further away from the ego need to win in the setting, and you realize how much of an opportunity you have to actually help each other improve your skill. And then really it's the tournament is the place to see, where is all of this stacking up? How do you manage that? How do you manage the ego side of it? Because to some degree, ego is a good thing, right? It can drive us in positive ways. It's not always a negative to have an ego about your abilities and your skills. So how do you utilize your knowledge of where your skill set is, combined with the need to make everyone better? I kind of think they go hand. A guy who used to train with us, and he now has his own school, he would say,
all the time, because it's not uncommon to get frustrated with yourself because you want to do better. Like, I'm like that. I have some teammates that are like that, who are like, we just want to do better. And it's not like I'm like, I should have beat you. It's like, oh, I want to bring more out of myself. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But he would see me, like, be frustrated with myself because I want to do better and I wanted to bring out more. And he'd be like, hey, no ego in training. Ego's for competition. No ego in training. And I was like, that's a very important distinction to make. Like, this is where you need to be working, trying things. This is where you need to be losing and getting smashed and suffering. And you can do this with your teammates because they care about you and they're going to push you to your limits and exceed them a little bit so that you can go over the edge, so that you can progress. And you can do that in a safe environment. And you don't want to do that with somebody who doesn't care about you and somebody you don't trust. I guess you could, but that sounds
so true
dangerous.
on so many levels. How long did it take you to get to that space mentally? I feel like that's a pretty evolved way of looking at. It seems so simple, but I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, no, it's not simple, because it takes a lot of self-discipline to be willing to look at yourself and to be willing to recognize what are your signs of having an ego. And I've had it before where sometimes I'll feel like I'm not allowed to lose. Like, because of my rank or because I'm competing, I'll feel like I'm not allowed to lose. And I remember I was in a particular training and I got caught in a submission that was just like kind of uncanny. I thought I could get out of it just fine, and it turns out I couldn't. And I was like, no. And then my other teammate who was like helping push the training that day, he was like, yo, get this emotion out of your head. You're supposed to be losing in training. He's actually telling me, like, you want to lose. I mean, you don't. Nobody wants to lose. But you want your training to be so good that you are losing, that you are suffering, that you are getting smashed. And when you're in the middle of a 30-minute long Shark Tank, yeah, maybe expect that you might lose a little bit when you're fighting fresh people. So don't have this ego like, I'm not allowed to lose. No, do darn well your best that you're not going to. And if you do, slap them on the back, say good job, get up, try again.
It's definitely true that if you're not, if you don't lose, in some cases, you don't give yourself an opportunity to make the adjustment. And in training, you can make the adjustments as many times as you need, whereas in competition, you don't have that luxury. Because if the adjustment's not made, then you do lose. And that's a record loss, not a training loss opportunity to then fix the technique or watch video back or run it back with the same person. Was there ever a moment in your career where you had one of those lessons happen live that really stuck with you in competition?
Where I lost and I knew I just messed up?
Yeah.
I think so. It's usually like, yeah, I realized I made a mistake in there and it cost me the fight, and I was like, oh, I understand. But it wasn't like I didn't realize it beforehand, but I realized it as it was happening and then afterwards, and I was like, I don't know, I was hard on myself, and then I was also compassionate towards myself too, because it's like, I know now, I was taught something very valuable. This isn't like a vain experience where it's just like, here, you just get this slap of, you suck. Like, it's not a vain experience because I took away something that was very valuable and I tried to make that my perspective. Yeah, it sucks. Like, oh, why didn't I realize? But now you know. And there's, as long as you keep going, you'll find success. It's when you quit is when you don't.
I feel like in defeat, there's obvious lessons in any sport, because you have the opportunity to go back and you look at it and you try and identify where the mistake was, and then you can game plan and move forward. But I feel like there's also lessons in victory. Sometimes they're harder to see. When you look back on this ADCC performance, were there anything constructive things that you feel like you could take away from such an incredible victory on that scale at ADCC on that night?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, if you can win and still learn, like, that's the best. Why not? Yeah, I look at every fight that I have, and I criticize myself and find where I was weak here. I should have been a little stronger here. I should have made this tighter here. I should have been more active here. I look at all of my fights, no matter if I win or lose, and I try to find my own mistakes so that I can exploit them and make myself better faster than my opponents can try to exploit them. It's like a little challenge with myself. Like, okay, let's see if you can get to my mistake before I get to it.
What were your mistakes or perceived mistakes, opportunities that you feel like are things you're taking away from the match with Gabi?
I think I was really patient. I could have, like, I understand so much of what I was doing there. Like, I understand why I was doing everything that I was doing. So I don't feel like there was tons of things I should have necessarily changed because how I did it worked and worked well. I maybe could have tried to do the arm drag a little sooner, and I kind of was. Like, the last 3 minutes I was trying to hit him, but I wasn't necessarily finding the right timing, and so I was backing out really, really early into it because, you know, it wasn't going to be good. You don't want to make a mistake with somebody who's so much bigger than you and more experienced.
Right.
And I think there's a couple places where I could have been more explosive, like when I had the arm, and as soon as I had it tucked right here, I should have just exploded up and went back at that point, but I was like, whoa, this is happening. Let me step over your head, like slow motion happens, and I'm like, Amy, why?
That is incredible that in that moment you had the awareness to see and feel what's going on and even have like oh my God, this is real.
Yeah, I was just slow. I think I was just slow.
Do you feel towards the end of those matches, obviously it's a long day, it can be a long day, and we are conditioning and strength and training and reps in the academy and everything like that. Do you feel like you were exactly where you wanted to be mentally and physically in those moments?
Yeah, I think I was sufficient. Could I have been better? Yeah, always. But I feel like I was sufficient for what I needed.
How do you handle in those moments, like if we go to the arm drag, you guys go to the ground, you go out of bounds, you can hear in the video, I mean, the stadium erupts, right? I don't know if you heard it in the moment, but watching it back is insane. It's like so audible and so loud. It's like the main band comes on stage to actually play a finale. And I always wonder, can you feel that? Like, when that happens, do you recognize that? And then do you have to talk yourself back from the adrenaline dump that gives you? Are you not bothered by it at all? Like, what is that emotional experience for you, the athlete, in such an iconic moment?
So, my coach yells at us when we train. Sometimes it's really aggressive, and I just have to be like, chill out. I'm actually getting distracted. But I think I've never been bothered by the crowd. Like, when I fight, I know too well that where my focus needs to be is in the fight, and it doesn't matter what's going on outside of the fight. What matters is I need to be performing, is I need to be fighting this person. I'm aware of it, but I don't let it affect me. And that's how it was at ADCC too. Like, I was aware that people were screaming, but I was so much more focused on, I need to get on top. And I have a mission to do here. And maybe there's a second here and there where I'm doing okay and I can hear people and it's just kind of like, oh, cool, that's like, they're happy, great. But most of the time I'm just like, I'm here with a mission, and that's where my focus stays.
I have to ask about the handshake because it seemed so interesting to me. I was on the edge of my seat, and so respectfully, you go over, extend your hand, and there's this moment where, like, you can hear a pin drop. I mean, it was so, I was like, I thought I was missing something. I thought that, like, the stream was messed up or there was, like, a glitch because there was this, I timed it. It's 4.5 seconds, actually, from when you extend your hand to when it gets shaken. Because I was curious. I was like, there's no way this feels as long as it feels right now. So it's
no, it was that long.
It's
it was that long.
4.5 seconds of you standing there deadlock, waiting, and I'm like, what?
Hey.
What was that like? What was going through your head when that happened?
So they were messing with the points, and I knew once they started messing with the points that I was going to get points. But if they hadn't started messing with them,
the guard pass, like for guard pass or the takedown?
Both. I knew I had to have gotten something.
Right.
Yeah,
Totally.
like I was
Agreed.
okay, I had to have gotten something here. And so I was like, oh, did I not get any points for that? Like, you let us keep going for a really long time, so did I not get points for that? And because he stood us back up, and he was like, okay, we're going to reset you and go to overtime. And I was like, all right, but did I not get any points for that? Like, I just wanted to understand, like, where he was coming from. And he's like, well, wait. And he went to the table. And as soon as they started messing with it, I knew I was going to get points. Whether or not it was 2, 1, or half a point, I knew I was going to get points. And I knew that was the win. So I was like, okay, I know the fight is technically over. There's still a chance it's not over. But I knew the fight was over, and she was looking behind her, and so I went over and shook her hand because I knew the fight was over at that point. And she didn't notice me because she was looking at someone she was talking to, probably her coach or a friend or something. She was talking to them, so I was just like, I was waiting. I was like, I'm the only person, like, in near proximity. She's going to see me eventually. And then eventually I was like, hey, come shake my hand. And she's like, oh, okay, come. Like, yeah, but I know to everybody else, they're like, she's not shaking her hand. Like, no, she just didn't see me.
So interesting. Admittedly, I definitely thought that she knew you were there, and this was a conscious, like, kind of not really settling into the moment and accepting that yet. But I didn't think that she could be watching or paying attention to a coach. So, with respect, that's a possibility. But yeah, that was quite a moment in the fight. And then you had such a great your post-fight, like, interview, and the things you had to say were just very, like, wholesome and well spoken. And you talked a little bit about being glad that I don't want to butcher what you said, like, either like being glad that you found jiu-jitsu and it allowed you wanted to see who you could become, and this gave you an avenue to explore that versus spending your time doing other things that might not have been productive for your life. And correct me where I'm wrong there, but what was it about jiu-jitsu that you saw, this is really somewhere where I can see the potential of everything that I could be?
I think just the fact that I could train jiu-jitsu and I could be something and it was happening was monumental. Not that I won XYZ, not that I did XYZ, but the fact that I had an opportunity to use it to be something more and that I could do it, like I did it. That just showed me the ability each person has to create something of their life and create what they want of their life. And when I said that, I actually changed my words slightly from how I was thinking when I said that after that speech I gave, because I was thinking about the kids who don't have something like jiu-jitsu to put their time towards, the kids who don't have a direction and who don't have guidance and who don't have a mentor like I did, and how they're on the street doing something unproductive with their time, unwholesome, something that's probably mischievous and getting them into trouble, and they didn't or don't have that to put themselves to. And I remember being really grateful because my life could be so different. Maybe I found a different avenue, maybe I didn't, but I knew I was grateful that I had that, and I wished I could give that to people who didn't have something that could build their lives into something good with.
How did that mentorship begin? Because we're talking about a mentorship, obviously, that was very powerful at a young age, but also outside of the family.
I started training when I was 13, and I was just like any other student, but maybe my coach has a knack for seeing, like, potential in students, so maybe he saw something like that in me, maybe not. I don't think so. We weren't even friends for the first year and a half of training. It was like slowly developed a friendship as I stayed there. But my dad made him aware that, like, our family situation wasn't super great and that they were having problems. And Coach still let me come train and stuff. I think he had compassion on me, or pity, and I think he just honestly acted mercifully. He's like, hey, I think he saw himself in me, and he was like, you know, I can do something good here. I can give you something that I never had. And he's told me that that was his goal. He's like, you know what, I want to give you the opportunities to be something that I could have been, but I didn't have these opportunities. I didn't have this, and I would like to give it to you.
Wow.
And he didn't say that to me outright when I was younger, but that's how he acted. And as we grew to know each other more, we could say that.
Right.
Like, he could tell me why he was inclined to be there for me.
Do you feel any calling to provide that to other athletes, or to, I don't know, up-and-comers is the right term, because I don't want to exclude other people that might not have like a future competitive potential, but do you feel like a philanthropic or like a give back call to kind of be that for somebody else or a group of people in the future?
Yes. Since training jiu-jitsu, yes, I've always felt like, you know, there were some people who taught me, and I should give back and teach the same way I was taught. But also, I've always been very passionate about this subject. Like, I remember studying in junior high and high school, writing essays and learning about family structures and learning about mentors and teachers, and I was frustrated because I felt like there's 30 students to one classroom, and the teachers don't have time and energy to put enough attention to detail to notice things about students and to care about them and have like really solid relationships with their students. I've cared a lot about that subject, and I found out that I was an example of the student finding what I always believed there was, which is the kind of coach and mentor that my coach was. And I realized that after a couple years, and I was like, the real, these people that I think are there, that I strive to be, I'm finding them, I'm finding examples of them, and I can emulate this more. And I remember thinking that was, if I can be like you in this way, I'll have done something monumental.
It's so interesting hearing you talk about this, because far before finding martial arts, they weren't an option in the town that I grew up in, but growing up skiing in Colorado, my coaches played this instrumental role in my development as an athlete, but really as a person. And there were points in my childhood when my parents were going through separation that felt very weird. On one side of it, it felt cool because I had the separation of the home created a lot of freedom for me. As long as I was responsible, I could go out, I could do what I wanted, I could, communicate, be out later, go to training, I had skiing, I had school, and all this stuff. But then on the other side, there was the emotional side that I wasn't really dealing with, which was the destruction of a family structure. And at the time, I didn't really think much of it, but like a whack-a-mole, it would pop up, and there would be these emotional bouts that would kind of like take over my ability to see things as an athlete and as a student. And I would find myself going to my coaches and being like, I don't really know who to talk to about this stuff, and I don't really even know how I feel, but I want to tell you, and I want you to know that I really want to keep skiing, but my head's kind of cloudy right now. And they would provide this very loving, kind of unbiased feedback from this third party who had nothing to do with my family, cared for me, cared for my parents and my family, but they weren't involved in the minutia of the day-to-day and this house and that house and whatever. And it just always stuck with me, like that it was such a profound style of relationship that is expressed through athletics. And this physically demanding thing that you're showing up for all the time. You don't have to. No one's making you go to jiu-jitsu, but you find yourself there every day, every single day after school, every single day that you have free time. When you look back to that experience with your coach, and like you said, from 13, so it's a very young age, how did your relationship with jiu-jitsu change as your relationship with your coach changed and your family dynamics were changing?
Gotcha. I think I latched onto jiu-jitsu really well, and so I think I would have continued to learn well, grow quickly in jiu-jitsu. But I think when my coach decided he cared a little bit more about me, I think it expressed in how much he wanted for me and would kind of manifest for me in training and for my life in general. He started to build a bigger vision of what he could give me and started to help provide more ways for me to have opportunities than just a normal coach might. Like, he starts acting like a manager, more like a life coach instead of just my jiu-jitsu coach. He started trying to expand my opportunities for me and be a way of providing some of those opportunities. And I think you can't ask that of your coach. That's not in their job description, to go so far out of your way to help somebody. And I think the more he started to care about me, the more he did just that.
And at this point, are you starting to get involved in competition? Was that kind of always from the jump for you, or was that a later development?
I think so. I didn't compete until after a year and a half training. It's not like I planned it that way. I tried to do 2 tournaments and they fell through. My mom wasn't the biggest fan of like that kind of stuff. And you know, the tournament, sometimes you're waiting there for forever and she's just like, I don't like this. So so it was just, you know, coach was going anyways, and it, like, after my first one, it was just like more convenient for us to both go together. Like, so we'd just carpool and go down. And like, that system just worked out really well. Like, I could just follow him around at the tournament. I could go compete. Like, there's other people and I'm just with them. It just worked out that way. And so we just started competing more often that way. We'd both just go to the competition, and he started paving the way for me to do that.
So, a quick note on the competition. It's very frustrating when you have to wait for a long time. I'm not going to name the promotion just out of respect. I'm sure they're trying to get better. But I've done a couple different ones, and most recently this Jiu Jitsu World League one was so on point. They were so, like, you get there, you check in, you go. It was such a seamless experience. It was great. Done
Which
some
tournament?
Other ones. The San Diego one, Jiu Jitsu World League.
Oh, gotcha, yeah.
So they put on a fantastic event. It's run so well. As a competitor, you're in, you're out, you're moving along. Everything's just like buttoned up and great. I've done some other ones where one I almost just straight up left. Like, the level of disorganization is so frustrating, because it's not a sport where you can just like hop in. You know, you're not like getting on a roller coaster. You have to get your body ready, get your mind ready, get your heart rate within a striking zone of like where you might or might not be competing. And then you're also managing just general adrenaline and like hormones and stuff. And so when they just ice you for an hour and then they go, okay, group 15, you guys are going, you're like, what? How is this allowed?
Right, yep. I think the longest I've waited for a fight before is, well, so it's not so bad to wait for your fight if you know you're going to wait. The problem is when you don't know you're going to wait. I waited 5 hours one time thinking I was fighting in 10 minutes.
That's like so unacceptable. I
was so mad. I was so mad. By the time they got me a match, they found me, I was like a teenager. I was like 15 or 16. I was like a green belt or an orange belt or something. They found, like, I guess they lost my cards. What? And they found a match and threw me in with a kid who was like younger than me, less experienced than me. And I didn't even care. I was just mad, and I just ripped him a new one because I was mad. And then I felt like a jerk.
It's like, it would be like when you're waiting for a flight and they just keep delaying your flight. But then when you get on the flight, you got to fight someone right away. That's the difference. It's like everyone hates having their flight delayed, but then you get to sit down and fly somewhere. But if you then had to fight someone the second you got on the plane, it's a very different thing. And so they need to understand that and to try to figure out, I don't want to knock on them for too long, but try to figure out a way to make this a more streamlined process. I think it can be figured out. How is ADCC in that regard?
So ADCC, you knew you were going to wait a long time in between matches, and so it was okay. Like, I've had a couple tournaments where that was just the thing, is like you do one match, okay, you cool down, you wait, you maybe have a snack. You just keep yourself mentally like in check. You don't have to be super, super focused, but mentally in check. Don't allow any junk in your head. And then, you go through the process of re-warming up. So I anticipated that with ADCC. That's how it was. Good to know that beforehand then.
Yeah, I think it's expectation management, right, as an athlete. Because and the more you compete in sports in general, that there's this little bit of a switch that flips when you get into whatever the thing that you're doing is, whether it's a match, whether it's a ski run, whether the gun goes off, or whatever it is. There's a change that happens where you then dial in super 120% to those moments in front of you. We know as athletes that that's not a manageable thing to have all the time. You can't be walking around your average day in that state. It's not efficient. But learning how to manage that in that big of a time frame, I would imagine becomes a little bit of a challenge. Do you guys talk about that? Like going into ADCC, was there any kind of preparation of like, hey, this is going to be a pretty long wait in between rounds. We're kind of forecasting this many matches for you. What are your conversations with your coach as you guys are prepping for something that big with that big of time delay?
Actually, we don't talk a ton.
Cool.
I think we're both like, okay, when do we identify the needs? Like how much time do we have until the next bout? So we know when we need to warm up, when you need to be like changed and ready to go. And depending on how much time you have, okay, now we figure out when you need to eat. And then everything else is just like lower priority. So unless you need it or you want it, like you don't even worry about anything else.
Right. For not talking about it, that is a very effective and efficient way to approach it, because you're right. You're eliminating everything that doesn't really serve you in that instance, whether it's conscious or not. For people listening, ADCC is a no-gi tournament. There's no gi matches within it. From 13 years old to now, when was the moment that you started really being drawn towards no gi? Was that something that you were interested in, or was that something that your coach proposed to you as like, hey, your athleticism and your style, I think that we should start training this? How did that all come about for you?
I never didn't train no gi. I've always trained gi and no gi.
Always together, just split through the week?
Yep.
And when did you start competing in no gi?
The same time I competed in gi. I would always, every tournament I've done, I've jumped in to, I'll have gi matches, take off my gi, go run and do no gi matches.
Do you individually have a preference?
No. Sometimes I'll be doing better at one and okay or not so great at the other, and then it'll switch. And sometimes I suck at both. I'm doing good at striking. Sometimes I suck at all of them, and I'm doing good at school.
Well, always take the doing good at school part. Maintain that, and then the rest can fluctuate.
Yeah.
What do you, as a high level competitor, someone who's competed in both for a long time, what do you feel like are the main differences that you draw from the two? Not in terms of like what is no gi and what is gi, but more what themes do you pull out of each that complement each other?
Gi is stickier. You have more control. So before you do anything in gi, you consider the grips. That's the first thing with the gi. And you might have to be a touch, never mind, I wouldn't say you have to be more explosive. No gi, you have to close the space a lot better. Anytime you're going to do a takedown, there's like a certain range your chest and your body has to be to them to get your takedown. So when I just consciously, when I go in between gi and no gi, I just think consciously for gi, make your grips, and then fight how you fight. And then for no gi, I think you need to get a lot closer. Like you need to be a little faster, a little close, and you need to get a lot closer to them. So I make that distinction right as I start to train, and I train almost the same way. Of course, there's different techniques that are allotted because you have grips or you don't have grips. So there are positions and transitions you'll use more often in one than the other. So that's a duh thing.
Right. Do you feel like do you try to draw takedowns out of gi and apply them to no gi, or do you really approach the stand-up separately?
No, like whatever you learn in one, there's a way you can use the concepts to be applied in the other. Like the concepts, for the most part, are the same. So yeah, I have a lot of no-gi takedowns that I like to play with in training that are gi inspired. I just find a way to make the grips slightly different and do the same thing. And there are some, well, all no-gi takedowns work in gi, so.
Right.
Well, unless it's like something that, you can't be as slippery with, because gi is a lot less slippery. So yeah, there's, some change in dynamics there.
And so you study and work within the physical therapy world, right?
Yes, I'm studying in it, not working in it currently.
Well, with your knowledge of it, I think you'll be able to lend yourself to this question. So, with the takedowns in no-gi and just takedowns in general, call it like wrestling, or I guess you could even expand it to judo. There's just it's a high demand on the skeletal system. Whether you're doing them properly or not, it's just a lot of rep and it's a lot of wear. So when you're training hard through the week and you're interchanging between gi and no gi and you're working your stand-up and your takedowns, how do you recover in between training sessions, and what does that look like for you on like a weekly basis?
So I feel this way. If you do your essentials, like sleep a good amount, eat right, and stretch, if you do your essentials, you're generally pretty good off. And you might occasionally need a rest day or a massage or something else to add to that. My brother and I and the rest of my team, we do like ice baths at our gym, and that's helpful for recovery, for training your circulatory system, and that's helpful for recovery as well. Sometimes like sitting in the sauna, just some little accessory things. And these accessory things, they're great. They add a little bit to it, but if you don't hit your basics, like how much good is the cherry on top?
So glad you said that, because I mean, in my career as a trainer, this is the never-ending broken record thing that I say, is how simple some of this can be. Like having a minimal stretch routine that you do daily, taking care, if you have access to sauna or ice bath or one of the two, even if it's super infrequent, but like all these things are small in and of themselves, but the impact that they can have on your body and your ability to show up all the time, it's like beyond it's non-negotiable. Almost has to be done. What do you do after an event like ADCC? Are you back on the mats Monday?
Yep. We drove home Monday morning, and Monday night we went to training.
So what does, for you specifically, talk to me a little bit about nutrition throughout the week with your variances in training intensity, and then what you do for strength training.
Okay. Nutrition. I have my boss, he had a connection with a nutritionist, and she worked with me for a year, and she helped me trial and error play with my diet and figure out like what foods make my body the most efficient, because I eat really clean for the most part. But she worked with me on my diet and helped me kind of figure out.
We're going to talk about that asterisk in a second. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. She helped me go through this process of trial and error and figuring out how much to eat so that my energy levels are balanced, and then what kinds of things to eat so I felt pure and efficient. And then also, if we were adjusting my diet for losing weight, gaining weight, maintaining, getting lean, she also developed with me how we adjust that plan a little bit to meet whatever goal or needs I'm looking at. So I generally eat really clean, and then I just adjust calorie intake or protein intake a little bit to adjust what my current goal is.
So are you monitoring that from a macronutrient perspective on like a rolling 24-hour basis, or is it more like if the competition is not on the calendar immediately, is this more of a ballpark?
Kinda. Like I'm habituated into eating like meals that I prep a lot, and I know if I go out to eat or something, like, you eat something decent. It's not a bad thing to have something nice every now and then, or have something different. Go eat some junk food every now and then. I try to stay away from it too, because at the end of the day, it's not that satisfying. It doesn't make you feel that good to go and eat a bunch of garbage and then feel like garbage. Like, it's just not that fulfilling.
Yeah.
So I think I just try to keep mindful, even if I don't have the food I typically eat, like, to eat something good, eat in good proportion, eat a variety.
You hit on
like
a really
the basics.
important point too, which is the evolution of it, right? Like you said, you refined this with the nutritionist over time. You guys made some tweaks and changes. It's really important for people to know that. Like, a diet is not a clandestine framework that you have to stick to, or everything bad's going to happen in your life. If you're making adjustments and trying to better understand your personal choices, or what foods make you feel good, what foods give you, like you said, make you feel pure and energized, what foods hold you back or make you feel sluggish, those things are going to change. Some months they're going to change from sleep, hormones, age, all these kind of things affect that. So if you're not attuned to the ability to make changes and adjust your own diet, then it's almost like you do yourself a disservice. So that's cool that you guys are having that conversation, and it's like it's an evolving thing as you go. Did you, when you were getting ready for ADCC, did you make any adjustments, or was it kind of just straight and narrow, stick to what you're doing and try to recover or rest more? No, I didn't change very much for ADCC. I just, knew I was okay to just have more carbs and more protein, because, I'm going to be going against bigger people. I'm strength training right now. I'm training harder right now. I need to up it. I think one of the most valuable things I got from doing the nutritionist program and like having it develop progressively is that I got to notice how my body would feel. I got to do these experiments and notice how I feel. And that was the most important thing I think out of all of it, is being able to like recognize myself, be aware of myself, because then I knew like the differences in how I feel and what I need. So now I can listen to my body essentially, and it can tell me what I need, and I can recognize that because I've had practice experimenting. And I think that was the most important thing that nutrition taught me. If I can get like meta for a second here, if you think about that, because I love this. I think it's an amazing insight to be able to have as a person, as an athlete, sure, but as a person too, especially just with how inundated we are with like, do this diet, do that diet, eat paleo, eat carnivore, eat vegan, eat raw, it's like you can't take a step without being informed on how you should be making your food choices. So when you talk about this feeling that you get, right, like you start to feel how foods affect you or make you feel in training and in strength training, to someone who wants to understand that, to someone who would like to have that type of awareness, what are some of the initial things that you found yourself noting in that process?
One, I think you notice way more often that you don't feel good than that you feel good. To notice that you feel good, you have to go where you don't feel good and then come out of it. Maybe you don't have to, but when I feel good, I think that's the normal. That's how it should be. And that is right. That's how it should be.
Yeah.
But I didn't recognize that I was feeling bad until I was feeling bad, and that I actually had been feeling better or could be feeling better. Does that make sense? I needed the contrast to know.
1,000%.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a really good approach to habit change too, just in general, is when you're always trying to pay attention to what makes you feel better, that's assuming that you're always feeling bad. But if your baseline can be that you feel good, and then you notice like, whoa, okay, if I go to evening training and I had, a smoothie with XYZ before and it was close, and I just couldn't train at the same level, your nutrition is impacting your energy levels all the time. So if you can identify that and go, okay, no harm, no foul, but next time I'm going to try to tweak this a little bit or that, by doing exactly what you said, identifying with some of the converse effects of the food or training style, it's a much more impactful way because you know when you don't feel good. Everyone can know that if you make an intention to notice it, which sounds crazy, but do you change your nutrition with you said you're ramping up your strength training right now?
I was a little bit for ADCC, not tons, but I mean, there's only so much muscle you're gonna gain in like the period of a couple months, or even a couple months sooner than that too. I believe for women it's like estimated between 0.25 and 0.5 of a pound per month, and for men it jumps in between like half a pound to 2 pounds per month, and that's just like the averages. But like there is a finite amount of muscle your body can build in a month. So I was like, okay, how much is my weight gonna really change? Not very much, unless I'm just eating a bunch of food and getting fat, which I guess is helpful, but I personally don't want that.
Well, and there's a difference between building muscle and then being able to utilize the muscle that you've built. So getting big to get big is useless. If you can get big and then make the muscle fast, then that's useful. Yeah,
well, if that's your goal, if your goal is to develop yourself so you look a certain way, you're aesthetic, if that's your goal, great. My goal is to be capable. And so as long as I'm capable, I don't care if I'm super big. It helps. Like, that's a part of strategy. Like, to get bigger, to be able to handle bigger people, that is a very valid point of strategy. And so I tried. I worked on it, did what I could in the time given, and just made work what I had.
What kind of exercises do you find yourself leaning towards most in your entire year? Like, obviously, if you're going to try to put on some muscle, things are going to change a little bit. But if we're talking about a week of high frequency training, maybe 2 days here and there, when you're doing your strength training, you're thinking about like essentials, things that are kind of always in your program that you're always maintaining. What are some of those exercises that you choose?
Plyometrics, back strength, so like good mornings and deadlifts. But plyometrics, those things, what was the other thing I was going to say? Speed and agility are always good. Being able to move fluidly, because if you can, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. If you can move well, you can be efficient. And that's great. Like, if you have phenomenal athleticism and you're efficient, man, you're reaching the moon. You're going to Jupiter. Like,
you're winning ADCC trials, and then you're winning ADCC. Yeah, it's a different thing to be able to use it and to choose things that are things like plyometrics, things that are speed related, that are taking your body's ability to move mass or change direction fast, because in the match, those forces are acting against you all the time, whether it's in an isometric hold or in an exchange of grip, or whether it's a transition and a new footing position. The resistance that you're feeling from your opponent, it makes the training challenging because you can't mimic it perfectly. But there are definitely exercises, like you said, things that are, build posterior strength, that are so good, because in most positions, if you don't have quality core integrity around your lumbar and good mechanics around your hips and your pelvis, you're just going to get beat up. I mean, you don't have to do a ton to get your body into a place to better handle that. But if people aren't doing anything, you're smashing your body by design of the thing that we love to do. And it can take a toll.
Yeah. Another thing I didn't mention is negatives, isometric and eccentric movements. Yeah, those are great, because then you practice lengthening your muscles in a way that's preventative of injury, but you're also like getting the maximum force out of them in the safest way, and just trains your resistance to things, to like go to your last muscle fiber and then come back. I like doing a lot of negatives, and it just feels, you feel a little stronger too. I like how it feels to do negatives.
The other thing about doing eccentric movements that's really valuable is that it reinstates quality mechanics. Like if you're doing a deadlift, right, and you're lowering the weight back down to the ground, you therefore aren't dropping it through the last 4 inches or making some kind of adjustment. So you're in reverse training the whole movement. So from a motor control perspective, it's really good to have eccentric movements, whether it's jumping up into the top of a pull-up and lowering yourself down, or doing a row and then letting the row go back to the ground. Anything where you're training the eccentric version builds better movement mechanics, and like you said, it's not as inflammatory on the muscle, so you can actually get away with doing more eccentric volume in a training cycle and still train hard on the mats. Whereas if you're just doing what a lot of people do, which is just lift heavy as you can frequently, your body gets banged up and it can't necessarily recover in time to then put forth the effort every single day on the mats when you're in there.
I think a good example of that is like the strongest I feel like my bicep curl is when I'm defending arm bars. I don't feel like I get really strong arms from lifting weights, but I have to constantly like defend as long as I can on an arm bar and then try to bring it back. Whew, you get really strong that way. And I think my physical therapist and also my good friend and kind of one of my mentors or coaches too, Ernie, he was kind of teaching me that you can use all 3 of the muscle movements in like a set. Like so if you're doing a row, you pull up concentrically, kind of quick or like at a good pace. You hold it at the top like an isometric for a second, and then lengthen and lower it down really slow. And you do that, and that way you get to work all of the muscle fiber types sequentially.
It's super important. Gordon Ryan was just talking about this, about how isometric jiu-jitsu is in nature. And whether you're using like false grips and no-gi, or you have a sleeve and a collar, a lot of it is this. It's this exchange back and forth where you're trying to get an advantage. Or it's a grip on the neck and the wrist, and you're trying to get an advantage or move beyond. It's not always the whole concentric thing. And when people typically train in the gym, they go do what you do. You squat in and out of it, you curl, you do some presses, something like that. But it's really this in between, the concentric, isometric, eccentric combination that's really valuable, that does really lend itself to the actual sport that you find yourself playing.
Yeah, like imagine China wall or like knee shield. Like imagine me versus Gabi Garcia. If I'm sitting here underneath Gabi Garcia and I think I need to be leg pressing her the entire time, I'm going to get freaking exhausted and it's gonna happen fast. Or I could keep my shin there like a wall, isometrically. Like my body's locked into that position so that I don't have to be exerting energy to make my muscles contract and relax. I can hold it. And I'm actually a little stronger that way.
Let's talk about timing, because I feel like timing is it's the intermediary between exactly what you're talking about and then the next movement that you do, right? So if you use the Gabi Garcia example, right? You're on bottom, you have a knee shield, she's driving down into you, you're keeping this isometric hold, and then you have to do something at some point explosively to try to get into the next spot. So when you're training, let's maybe first talk about on the mats. How do you think about timing in your game?
So I can create a timing, or you can give me an opportunity to act on timing. So if I create a timing, maybe I rock back and forward to get some momentum for, say I'm in the China wall or knee shield. Maybe I start moving you back and forward so that I can find momentum to come up my own momentum. Or maybe you are moving forwards and back on your own trying to pass, and I time one of the times you sit back to when I underhook and I come up.
Gotcha. So
Creating.
Creation or taking advantage of.
Yeah. It's countering, essentially. It's like, okay, I'm seeing the way you move. My body has picked up your pattern, and I'm responding to you at the right moment. Or I can create the right moment for myself by moving you or just moving myself, and I capitalize on a momentum I've created.
If you can maybe mentally put yourself in the worst position for a second, when you feel like you have no way out, how do you create a way out? This is a super selfish question for me because I struggle with this. I'll find myself in I'll be on bottom. Someone has really good top pressure and side control, and I feel like I've exhausted every single out that I have, and then I hit this point of helplessness where I mentally, I'm kind of like, what's the next thing that I could do? I've closed my eyes. I've tried to find space. I've tried to get my hip even a millimeter away. What do you reach for in those moments?
Reach for a lot of things. Reach for knowledge. I reach for like timing and explosive movements, because like in MMA there's a concept, they can either hit you or they can hold you. And if they're holding you, they can't hit you. If they're hitting you, they can't hold you. So I think there is a certain timing of when you escape. And if they're doing their best to hold you and they're just holding you and you can't get out of that, then you've got to wait for them to make a move or to advance to like a submission or something and time your escape off of when they move if you can't make them move.
I guess
is that helpful?
Yeah, I guess the difference there would be that in Jiu Jitsu they can't hit you all the time, right? So, I guess
they're not supposed to be hitting you.
Right, yeah. If they're a good training partner, they're not hitting you. Or if it's not combat jiu-jitsu, they're not hitting you. But if I'm thinking about what you're saying, in those situations, do you try to bait to get out, to pull out of that? So like if you're, let's use the side control bottom example, do you try to present a limb to say, hey, maybe they'll go for this, give up the leg to reach for the arm kind of thing, and then in that movement, that's when you go for your transition?
Yep. Baits, feints, those are great. Personally, I just don't stop moving. It's really hard to keep you down if you don't stop moving, but you do, like under my coach. All right, okay, am I going to be able to just push my coach off me? Maybe not, but maybe I never let him get there so that I don't have to deal with that problem.
Right, keep moving.
We'll get people who ask this at the gym, Coach, how do I get out of this position? He just looks them dead in the eyes. Well, don't get in it. It's like,
but
great.
True, right? I mean, this is, again, there's something that I notice is you never want to give up, right? Like you never want to accept a position. You never want to accept a bad position. I think that anyone who practices martial arts can wrap their head around why that's important. But when you're tired and you're at the end of, whatever round it is and how many training partners it is, there's that voice in your head a little bit that's like, just, chill for a second. And you can't ever let that become a thing.
Nope.
Because that's when you get pinned. That's when do you ever, in competition, have you ever had that voice speak louder than expected? Because you seem like a very mentally strong competitor.
No,
you're not a mentally strong competitor, or
no. Like I don't think I've had it where it's hit me like, Amy, you can't do it. Right. Like that's not an option. And when I don't give myself the option, like if not doing it is not an option, you have to find a way to do it. So yeah, my mentality stays in, there's a way, find the way. Instead of, oh no, I can't do the one thing I wanted to do. Look, Jiu-Jitsu has options. Your body is capable. You have options. Think outside the box, create a new avenue.
What do you think is the future of ADCC?
I don't know. Like, so Mo
you're gonna train for 24, right?
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
How big do you think that this can get?
Holy cow, I don't even know. I mean, I feel like I want to ask somebody who's been training longer than I have, who's seen the way Jiu-Jitsu has progressed and traveled, and I want to ask them what their thoughts are on it. Because I'm still relatively new to Jiu-Jitsu comparing to the people who have been in it for, 30, 40 years. I'm not even at 10 years yet. Like, I want to see what they think based on how much progress it has made in the past 10, 20 years.
I mean, even I was watching a match from 2005. It was Marcus D'Amata and Uriah Faber, actually. And this was '05. They're on like it looks like they're just in a random gymnasium, and there's a couple like ADCC signs in the background. And then you watch this event, and I mean, it looked like a full sport spectacle, fireworks, promotion. Like they did it so well, and I love this stuff, right? Like I'm gonna watch it no matter what. But watching it, I actually felt like for the first time, you could be a non-grappler. You could not do jiu-jitsu. You could not be involved in martial arts. And maybe you have an interest, maybe you don't. But you might actually be able to come across this event exactly how it was done and be excited and interested and want to know more. And to respect your point, I would much rather know the perspective of someone who's been around for a long time, because I as well haven't. But I can say that even in my position, it looked inviting and exciting. And I can only imagine what impact that can have on, let's say a 14-year-old, a 15-year-old who's seeing this for the first time going, wow, that's the real deal. Like, it just seems like there's so much promise right now.
Wow, yeah. Just thinking about it, I think it has so much potential. Because, like, how many people do you know who is like I feel like this. I feel like I know a lot of people in jiu-jitsu, but that's because I'm heavily involved in jiu-jitsu. But if I were to, like, go up to the campus or go to the store, like, most people would be like, oh, what's that? So imagine a world where jiu-jitsu is as well known and as prevalent as UFC or as boxing. And there's that much more participation in jiu-jitsu. What does that look like in tournaments? Organizations. Wow. What does that look like for women's jiu-jitsu? What kind of other events do we have? What kind of other competitions do we have? There's a huge amount of potential and possibility for the future here.
What do you say about that? I guess there's one criticism that comes up a lot is the complexity of the sport. So I'll give two examples here. One is anyone can go to Walmart, buy a football, and throw the football in their front yard, and then football pretty much makes sense. You can go watch it on TV. Boxing and MMA, if you're open to watching it and seeing the violence within it, you can pretty much understand that when someone gets knocked out, they're knocked out. When they get punched in boxing, you can get that. Jiu-jitsu is very complex, and grappling is, in many cases, even for people that practice it, difficult to understand because there's a lot of nuance to the position, the scoring, just what is happening within a match as it's happening. It doesn't really explain itself visually, so you do have to be willing to do a little research or ask someone who's involved to understand it. So how do you think a promotion like ADCC or IBJJF or just any of the subsidiary promotions start to handle this part of it, the complexity, to make it understandable and digestible for the average viewer at home?
I don't know if they really need to. Like, I feel like they're doing well with how they are, and I feel like if there's something else that somebody else wants to see in jiu-jitsu, I feel like somebody else is going to create it. Like, maybe we'll have more competitions where it's like the rule set is a lot different. Maybe some of it goes back to more like martial arts style jiu-jitsu that's for a fight, and maybe we get some that is more introductory to what jiu-jitsu is and more explanatory. I don't see why they would need to change their system currently because they're doing so well with it, and I feel like somebody else would create what they wanted to see different.
Having come off a win on that stage, are there any rules, any standards, or anything in place with how grappling currently is that you would like to see changed, or that you feel like if it were adjusted, it might be more, it might improve it overall?
What changes would improve jiu-jitsu? I wonder. I'm a little nervous or worried about jiu-jitsu. It has a lot of potential, but I hear things like jiu-jitsu is no longer jiu-jitsu because of some of the things that are taken out of it to make it more competitive, to make it easier for a lot of people to do. Like how Rickson Gracie talked about the day that jiu-jitsu becomes an Olympic sport, that it would no longer be a martial art, and that it would have lost something essentially. The biggest value I have in jiu-jitsu is that it has a practical application to taking care of me and to keeping me safe. That's the most valuable thing to me behind jiu-jitsu. And I wouldn't want that to go away, the necessity of that. That's so important to me. I wonder if there's a way that we can better represent some of the truths behind jiu-jitsu in fighting. Maybe we could have like self-defense jiu-jitsu and competitive jiu-jitsu be more affirmed titles. Like if you're coming here, that we're training specifically for competition, and in this one we're training for a fight, so that we don't lose some of the authenticity behind its nature as a martial art. Now, you don't have to train jiu-jitsu solely to fight. Like, there's a reason jiu-jitsu is a lifestyle. It's because it's in part a philosophy, and it's a way you live, and it's a way you take care of your body. So you might not necessarily need it to train you on a street fight, but that seems like that was its original purpose. Does that make sense?
No, it makes crystal clear sense. I just had a conversation with Richard Bressler about this exact thing. He was Rorion Gracie's first student in the United States, and he came into it as very heavily self-defense. He needed jiu-jitsu for self-defense, and jiu-jitsu changed his life and who he is very much. Admittedly, it's in his book. And this is one of his concerns, and I think this concern is shared with many other people who have been around jiu-jitsu for a long time, since its inception, at least in the United States, is as things become more sport, you're going to attract a lot of athletic people. So if athletic people see that they have a place to express their athleticism, they may be drawn towards it. And what you don't want to happen is that draw pushes people away that really need jiu-jitsu for the self-defense aspect, for the ability to protect themselves when they're walking home, for the ability to trap and block their opponents so that they can buy time to have someone else come and mitigate the situation. And I would agree with you. It's hard because it's a double-edged sword. What's that?
They are two different mindsets. Training for a fight and training for a competition are two different mindsets. Each competition has its own set of rules and strategies, and when you fight, there's not those things.
Right. And
there's so many other factors that go into a fight. And I wonder, maybe we could have like traditional jiu-jitsu and competitive jiu-jitsu. Like, they're just, both aspects are really important, and I wouldn't want to lose one or the other.
It would be interesting. I'm just thinking like way too far outside of the box. This doesn't make any sense, but since we're here, why not? If you had like a self-defense competition where you had an individual in the middle and you had attackers, and it was their ability to like quell the situation. I don't know how many people would show up to watch that, but it would be like the functional application.
Cool.
Yeah, of course we think it would be cool. I would be front row watching that.
Like, I want to see somebody use jiu-jitsu against somebody who's coming at them like punches. I want to see how they block and find a way to smack the guy in his head, take him down. Like, I want to see people use jiu-jitsu against somebody who's trying to come at them with weird angles, with weird strategies, and not just like, okay, let's approach this guard pole. Like, I want to see somebody be creative about how I'm going to attack you, and then me be creative back. I want to see that.
Yeah, I think it is a mental evolution in the game to be able to think that way too. The one thing that we've done in training a couple times that I thought was really interesting, it made me see things differently kind of on the spot, was we had one of our professors was a former Bellator fighter, and he's like, hey, during this role, I'm going to set this, it was like a plastic knife, like a training knife. And he's like, I'm going to set this knife over here. So he put it maybe like 3 feet away from us. And he's like, the round ends if one of us gets the knife. I was like, okay, that's simple enough, right? It completely changes the dynamics of what we were doing, because it took our, well, he knew much more than I, but like my pre-existing knowledge of jiu-jitsu and how we train and how we use it, and the slap hands and the collar grab and the camaraderie, and you've placed this element within it now that makes it more severe. And even though I respect him and he respects me, none of us want to hurt each other, that single fact, it brought to light how different a real life situation would be, even in a controlled setting where we know each other and trust each other. But I was like, whoa, this is different. I'm abandoning techniques that I use all the time to protect myself and to stop them from getting to that thing, because now that's priority number one, absolute priority number one. Mm-hmm. And it was one of those interesting moments in training where I was like, whoa, I thought everything was like this, and it's like that.
Yeah, that's one of the things that worries me, is that Jiu-Jitsu is fundamentally a martial art. It's based for a fight. And I don't want Jiu-Jitsu to be misrepresented to people who come in the future who are like, I want to take care of myself, and they start training competitively, because those are two different mindsets. So I feel like there needs to be a way to communicate what you're wanting in Jiu-Jitsu, because some schools I feel like just teach, and actually I don't know this because I don't go to tons of other schools, but I have the impression that some schools are really competition focused, and other schools, maybe they're more traditional and competition focused, or just traditional. But there needs to be something that happens with the communication about what you're looking for in Jiu-Jitsu, whether you're looking to compete or whether you're looking to fight. And I feel like competing and considering strategy, those all enhance you as a Jiu-Jitsu fighter, and those are all good too. But I think, like, I want a way of communicating, hey, I need to apply this to a fight so I can take care of myself, and I need to find a way to train that and have that be my habits over competing. That's what I want.
I think it's important to establish those kind of expectations, because, again, you don't want the person who needs it most to feel like they're not welcome in it, to be turned off by the intensity, when really they're the ones who need it the absolute most. They need the defense part of it. And if you're someone who you're getting bullied, low self-esteem, you're not really sure, and you go in and the first thing you see is just people getting obliterated, ready for competition, I can't imagine what that would be like to see. Like, you'd be like, maybe I don't need to defend myself.
There's a lot of expectation coming in.
Where would you say the balance falls at Zenith? Because you're producing, with you as an example, the best grapplers in the world. So how does the school manage the competitive aspect, the competition seeker, and then maintaining some of these traditional jiu-jitsu and martial arts principles within its walls?
I think there's some fundamental principles in jiu-jitsu. Like, take pressure, for example. Being able to put pressure and to handle pressure, to take pressure. I think whether you're training that for competition or training that for a fight, that principle of pressure, whichever avenue you choose to develop with, is still developed, and it helps you with each aspect. My coach has a couple MMA fighters, and every now and then we'll do like MMA trainings, and those are always geared really aggressively, and just the way I feel like the way my coach teaches in general, it's just more old school jiu-jitsu, like deal with pressure, really authentic technique, and it's just got a good thing going with that. I think a lot of times when you're a good fighter, a good jiu-jitsu fighter, like street fighter, I think that would help you in a competition. There's a couple little details you got to adjust. Like, you got to be smart about what things are points and what things are, rules and things. Those are just a couple little mental adjustments that you know. But I think a stronger fighter is a martial artist. And if you make a couple adjustments for tournament, you'll do really well. And that's how I feel like I am.
How strong is the temptation for mixed martial arts for you?
Like MMA?
Yeah.
Well, like, I love it. I love it. It's real. I want truth, and that's real. And I think, I don't know, I like it. I like training it. I feel like the way I prefer to train is to train like that, to train like I'm fighting, like somebody has a chance to hit me and I have to be mindful of that. Somebody's going to try this and I have to be mindful of that. I like training like that. And we just change a couple little details so that I can compete like at the IBJJF high levels.
But you don't have any desires to compete in mixed martial arts?
No. Like, I might do another fight or two just for fun, but UFC champion was never what I wanted. It's just not the direction I want.
What is the direction you want?
See what I can do with Jiu Jitsu.
You've already... So, the reason I asked that specifically is the ADCC championship is one thing, and it's a massive accolade. And it establishes you as the greatest female grappler in the world right now. To repeat that and to go, like, do you want to go kind of Gordon Ryan route, like become absolute undisputed, never contested person, or do you want to spread your skills across gi and no gi, IBJJF, ADCC, and just stay away from MMA altogether? Or what does kind of like maybe the next 5 years look like for you in your head as far as jiu-jitsu?
So I don't plan on like transitioning to MMA or anything. Like, the training, I think the cross training is helpful for jiu-jitsu. I think I just plan on competing, and I plan on learning, and I plan on teaching and having new experiences with jiu-jitsu. I think ADCC is like the greatest, one of the greatest. I'm sure there's going to be others that develop too. One of the greatest opportunities somebody else has given me to have an outlet, and I think that says nothing about the opportunities I can create. That's ADCC is something somebody else created for other people to attend, and that's one option. But there's a whole world of options of things I can create.
I like that. What can you expand on that a little bit?
It's a secret.
Okay, fair, respected. But but to be clear, there's things in your head, creative process, where you would like to establish or create or move in to leaving your mark on the world of jiu-jitsu in a fashion similar to that. I'm trying to like get the words out here and paraphrase this without having you say what you want to do, but you're thinking very big picture here.
Yeah, there's a world of opportunities here. One of the biggest things jiu-jitsu has taught me is that you have a phenomenal ability to create here. Decide what you want, put a plan to it, and be willing to work for it, and you can do it. Like, the world is open to you. You can do it. So what do you want to create? Well, you can create whatever there's a need for. You can create whatever you want.
Do you feel like after ADCC that wheel started rolling a little bit harder for you?
No. I feel like after Pan Am's last year, like, I knew it, but after Pan Am's last year, it was confirmed. Like, the world is open to your creation. And as soon as you realize that, all the things you want start coming to you, and you can be willing to create anything you want. As long as you're willing to do it, you can create anything. And that's like a really big, really intimidating thing, because now that you know you have this ability, you almost feel this like you're excited, but you're also intimidated because there's a lot you can do. Is there a responsibility now to create something because you know that you can? Like, there's a lot of like, I remember feeling a lot like I can do anything here. Whoa, what do I want? What should I be doing? Like, what's my mission? What am I going to do with this? What am I going to create? These are all thoughts that were happening when I was like a brown belt, purple belt, maybe even starting.
how cool that something, I mean, now I'm just kind of reflecting on like your story as a whole, from the mentorship, the early age of getting involved in this, to going up the ranks, and then your recent performance, then to walk away from all of that, or walk away at different stages with this idea of like just furthering your self-efficacy, that you can do whatever you want. It's almost like cliche, right? Like people say that all the time, but you said it so succinctly that when you feel it, when you actually feel that that's true, that you can do whatever you want to do, whether it's from the Pan Am stage or the ADCC stage, that is a profound realization that many people talk about, but not that many people actually get to understand that feeling. And it sets you up to do, it's a superpower, right? It is a superpower. You find out that you're capable of putting your mind to it, and then you're faced with this responsibility of, then what do I want to put my mind to?
Yep.
Well,
yep, I think that's the biggest. We have here in America, we have like an obesity problem. And throughout the world, there are problems of hunger, and there are problems of starvation, there are problems of conflict. But I feel like the world has a bigger problem. It is the problem of disbelief.
Explain. I get what you're saying, but explain.
There's so much that each person is capable of doing here. And most people just do not know that they can do it, or they do not believe that they can do it. As soon as that mentality shifts, there will be opportunities and experiences that happen here that'll change the world. And yes, one person can do it.
Speaking of the world, I meant to touch on this earlier, but I found your insights on travel and perspective to be really cool. And I've heard you talk about the importance of getting outside of like the bubble, so to speak, and seeing other cultures, other places in the world. Why are you drawn towards that? What is important about perspective and travel to you?
I think a couple things. I think if I can understand other people, I can better communicate with other people. I can better associate with other people. I can better love other people. And sometimes I think other people might have figured out something I've not figured out. They might do something better. And I might want to take that something better and give it to other people who need something better too. Or maybe I figure out that there's a problem that I have, that these people have, that these people have. And now that I've recognized this problem, now I'm put in a place where I can do something about it. Maybe I know what is needed to be created. There's a lot of things that come out of seeing new people, and I want to be able to care about people, and I want to learn. I want to be able to give people opportunity to be something, to create, and I want to, like the same thing I said, raise the bar for them, raises the bar for me, teach them, they teach me, I learn from them, they learn from me.
I think we should clone you, Amy, a couple times.
I'm flattered, thank you.
It's refreshing to hear this kind of perspective as someone I've spent like a lifetime traveling, and I feel like every time I come back from a foreign country, whether it's first world, third world, whatever, the perspectives that you get, it's so critical. And I truly wish everyone in the world, I know for different reasons, people are not traveling or seeing places, but the perspectives that you get, they're very impactful. And I think that travel alone has the power to create better people, because it shows you what else is out there. It challenges your views purely by environment, and it's to see someone like yourself have these perspectives while on top of such a big stage, and then have intention and direction and where you want to go. Like, hell yeah. I mean, it's awesome.
Thank
so
you.
keep winning. keep standing on top of your platform and keep creating. I mean, it's going to be really fun to watch your career as you go beyond this past milestone, and really like hone in on what that next step is for you. So thank you so much for your time, Amy. We'll have to do this again in the future.
Sure.
It was really a pleasure talking with you and getting to chat, and thank you.
Sure, thank you. I have really enjoyed it.